4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Project Egg Show, where you can come to get inspired by entrepreneurs who are changing the world. Now, today, we have the honor of speaking with Laura Gassner Otting. Laura's 25-year resume is defined by her entrepreneurial edge. She served as a presidential appointee in Bill Clinton's White House, helping shape AmeriCorps, left a leadership role at respected nonprofit search firm Isaacson Miller to expand the startup ExecSearches.com, and founded and ran the nonprofit Professionals Advisory Group, which partnered with the full gamut of mission-driven nonprofit executives, from startup dreamers to scaling social entrepreneurs to global philanthropists. She is the author of Mission Driven, a book for those moving from profit to purpose, and the upcoming Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. Through her own commitment to give back, Laura has helped build a local Montessori school, co-founded a women's philanthropic initiative, advised a startup national women's PAC, grew a citizen leadership development program, and completed 3 charity-inspired marathons. In addition, Laura has done so many incredible things with some very impressive accolades that I could not possibly cover in this brief introduction. So without any further ado, please meet Laura. How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I'm so glad that you could join me on the show today. It is such an honor to be speaking with you today. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I will tell you, I probably made a mistake by not getting you my updated bio, because the book is not upcoming. In fact, it came out 5 weeks ago tomorrow. So it's been out for 5 weeks, and it debuted at number 2 on the Washington Post bestsellers list, right behind Michelle Obama.
All right. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Note to self, got to update the bio.
So, Laura, again, thank you so much. I'm so excited for today. Let's jump right in. What is your story?
So my story is one of somebody who is fascinated by other people's story, right? So like this question, of all the questions you're going to ask me today, what is your story will be the hardest question you ask me, because I have spent my career, I always tell people that my superpower is that I am able to look at other people and see their greatness in a way that maybe they've never been able to see it before, or maybe for the first time they're able to believe it and actually act on it and do something amazing with it. And so when I think about my story, I will say, in the interest of full disclosure, that my story is one of U-turns and left turns and right turns. I could look back and I could say, well, my path is clearly one where I was an entrepreneur and I wanted to do this, that, and the other, and hurrah, I'm successful. But that would be bull, and it wouldn't be of service to your audience who's trying to figure out how to be better and who's so scared of failing that they don't actually do anything. My story is one where I thought I was going to be the first female United States senator from the great state of Florida. That was my plan. And so I went to law school, and then I realized in law school that I hated law school and that it was the worst place in the world for me. And so I dropped out and I joined a presidential campaign, and I met a lot of great friends along the way, one of whom ended up as the head of volunteer coordination. And I ended up walking into the White House at 12:01 on Inauguration Day, and ended up becoming a presidential appointee in the office that created AmeriCorps, and 1 million young people have served there. And then I was dating a guy who was going to move to Boston, and so I met with a headhunter and thought I should get a job in Boston, and realized the headhunting firm was in Boston. So I went to Boston and I became a headhunter because I was 25 years old and had a Rolodex from working in the White House that could choke a horse, but no ostensible skill set. But I knew that I was in love with this guy, and 21 years of marriage later, it was a good decision. So I moved to Boston. I became a headhunter. And then when I was there, I spent 4 years learning from the best and the brightest how to do this work in a way that changes lives, that changes organizations, and uses talent as the lever to make the world a better place. And then one day I realized that there was a better way to do it. And once I realized there was a better way to do it, I learned that I wasn't part of the solution anymore, which left me in one place, which was that I was part of the problem. And that was untenable. I couldn't stay in that place, right? So I started my own firm and I ran that for 15 years until I sold it to the women who helped me found it. And then I had a crisis of identity where I said, well, who am I when I'm no longer Laura Gassner Otting, CEO of this thing and handing over my business card? And so I bought lauragassnerotting.com and started writing blog posts. And a friend of mine who was the executive producer of TEDx Cambridge at the time said, you really ought to do a TEDx talk on this latest blog post. And I said, no way, I don't want to speak. That's terrifying. I have no interest in that. And my son, who was sitting in the car next to me, said, hey, Mom, don't you always tell me I should do things that scare me? And don't you always tell me that if it doesn't challenge me, it doesn't change me? And don't you always tell me that life starts on the other side of the fear? So what gives, Mom? And I was like, oh, great, I got to do this. 6 weeks later, I'm on the TEDx stage, no notes, no net, big red circle, me, go. And I crushed it for like 11 and a half minutes. And then there's this moment where I look stage right and you can tell that I have no idea what I'm supposed to say next. But then I gathered it back in and then I got my way through the last 30 seconds and I finished it and I went off stage and I was like, that was exhilarating and terrifying and really fun. And I want to learn how to do that. And that talk got some attention. At the same time, Hillary Clinton didn't win the presidency. I wasn't going to become the head of presidential personnel. Wah, wah. I got asked to do more speaking. That more speaking came with offers for money. And then I went, wait, this is a job? You can do this? Tell me more. And so I spent the last 3 years making my way as a speaker and now writing this book to support that speaking. That's based on 20 years of what I've learned from the left turns and the right turns and the U-turns, which were the only, in fact, like really the only interesting people that I interviewed over 20 years of executive search were the ones whose careers were like this. So I wrote a book about what I learned about those people. And so here I am. That's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Well, that's an incredible story. And I totally understand what you mean by left turns and right turns and U-turns and whatnot. That's incredible. So throughout all of the things that you've done, all the positions you've held, the accomplishments, the books, the speeches, what would you say are some of the biggest takeaways?
Oh, well, I think the very biggest takeaway is that failure is not finale. Failure is fulcrum, right? And there is still if there is still breath in your body, you can learn from a mistake and you can grow and you can change. And it's funny because when I speak, I tell this whole story about how we grow up as adults thinking that we're going to get hired and paid and praised and promoted based on showing competence in one specific thing and sticking to that, living in our center of excellence. And if we step to the left, we get fired. We step to the right, we fail, right? We don't want to do this. We stay in our center of excellence and we're afraid to do it. But our children spend all day long, every day in school, learning something that they've never done before. You figured out algebra, it's time for geometry. You got geometry, it's time for trigonometry. You've got trigonometry, like hold the phone, calculus is in the house. And do they know how to do it every time? No, of course not. Like they fail and they get up and they learn and they grow. And so they don't think about failure as we do as finale, but they think about failure as fulcrum. And it's funny because I was giving this talk about 3 months ago in Austin at Renaissance Weekend. And I said, failure is not finale. And then I turned to stage left and there was Commander Tim Kopra of NASA. And Commander Tim Kopra has gone on 3 spacewalks. And as soon as I said it, I looked at him and then I went, wait, no, for you, sir, failure is most definitely fulcrum. But for the rest of us walking around on terra firma, we're not going to die if things don't go right. In fact, Eleanor Roosevelt said that we would worry much less about what other people thought of us if we understood how little they did. Nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention. And in fact, it's in the failure that we learn how to do better and we learn how to grow. So I think the biggest takeaway I would say is that failure is not finale, it's a fulcrum.
So you've been in the public eye for a while now.
I've been mostly stage left for a while now. And I've done that on purpose because I'm a raging introvert. I like the one-on-one conversation. It's awesome. But you put me in a cocktail party and I will stand in the corner and people can come talk to me, but I do not work a room. It is not where I get my energy. I do not like it. It's not fun. So I thought I was going to be the first female senator from the great state of Florida. But then I realized I didn't want to do it once I started volunteering in campaigns, because I realized that what I like to do is I like to see the greatness in other people and help them thrive, which is why I spent 20 years doing executive search, putting the right people in the right jobs so they can change the world. So I came very reticently to the world of public speaking. So I do a lot of political fundraising. I do a lot of nonprofit fundraising. I do a lot of sort of coaching to very publicly facing executives. But this whole public eye thing, where I am the person with the name out there, is new to me.
How has it impacted your life, though? Like, how has it shaped you, changed your identity?
What, the recent few years of being in the public?
Yeah, and working with people in the public and being on this journey.
So I have recently come to terms that I have a massively large ego. I have always known that I was ambitious and that I wanted to grow and that I wanted to develop big things. But the idea that I have an ego and an ambition for myself is sort of new to me, because it's always been kind of cloaked in helping the world be a better place, getting this candidate elected, helping promote this cause, helping move this organization forward. And I was the vessel or the vehicle to help do that, but it was always sort of in pursuit of something else. And so where it's shaped me is and I write about this in Limitless, is that I've come to a comfort level with ambition. So, I think ambition gets a really bad rap. Like we like, oh, she's so ambitious. Like nobody says he's so ambitious. Like we still don't like people that are just like brazenly, like Machiavellianly ambitious, but we definitely don't like women who are ambitious. And I have come to learn that if being ambitious means that it means that you're putting yourself ahead for things you care about, then it's okay. And so I ask women especially, but I ask everyone this question: will being in a position of more power, with more money, with more foundation, with more opportunity, with more influence, with more of anything that you need, help you to show up better for the people that you love and the causes you hold dear? And of course they say, well, yeah, of course it does. And I go, good, then it's not your ambition, it's your responsibility. So that's how it's shaped me. It's shaped me to understand that I do have this ambition, I do have this ego, but that it's my responsibility, because with it, I'm bringing substance and a message that I'm hoping is impacting people's lives. And I'm getting that because I get text messages and Instagram messages and Facebook messages, and people come up to me, I've got a stage all the time, and they say, you've changed my life. I quit my job. I, left my husband. I did whatever the things are that I do to change my life because you inspired me to do something different. Somebody got a tattoo on their arm of the cover art of the book because they were inspired by the message. And so it's impacted me by realizing I do have this ego, and that's okay. And my ambition is there to do these other things, but also I better get it right. Right? So this burden of potential of what this could be as I'm going out there, it's not just I'm a motivational speaker going hustle, 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 right? I actually have to get right what it is I'm talking about, because people are taking it seriously and they're changing their life because of it. So it's exciting and it's heavy and it's sort of all at the same time. I say it's wonderful and it's kind of hell. It's wonder hell.
That's an awesome word.
I wrote about it a couple of weeks ago when I was on a red eye back from a speech I was giving in Vancouver. And it started something like, it's 4:28 a.m. or maybe it's 7:28 a.m. or maybe it's 1:28 a.m. I don't even know. But somewhere between the blur that was yesterday and the blur that is tomorrow is the space that I'm in right now. And the space I'm occupying right now has all these messages from people who are my audience sending me things that they loved, that they heard, that they're going to make some change because of. I hope I got it right. Right? It's like right here in the space between yesterday and today is this time zone free space where I'm sitting bolt upright in this chair that doesn't recline, flying, at 25,000 feet, thinking, I hope I got it right. That's wonder hell.
I feel like that's a really powerful message. But I do feel like it comes secondary to, or not secondary in matter of importance, but it is a next step to the first step, which is identifying both who you are and what you actually stand for, right? Because if you don't stand for anything, then how can you get it right? Because there's nothing to get right. So how do you, or how did you, and I believe it's a constant journey, but how do you get in touch with who you really are at your core and what you believe and what you stand for, your values?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, I wrote 40,000 words in my book on specifically this topic because I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I'm friends with a lot of other people who speak for a living, and we're in this little sort of super secret Facebook mastermind group. And there's a lot of talk about like getting the bits right and getting the stagecraft right and all of that. And I think that stuff is important because that's the entertainment. That's why someone will listen. But I was like, we have to get what we're saying right too, because that's why we're on the stage. And most of the speakers in that group do that. For me, I think it all comes down to this question of who defines success for us, who defines who we think we are and who we should be. And the core of the book Limitless is based around the idea that success doesn't always equal happiness. And that's because we're fed this idea of success that it has to be, building the big business and owning the giant car and having the fancy boat and making the most money and having the nicest title and being in the company that has the best brand prestige or whatever the thing may be, which may mean success for you. And that's awesome if it does. It may not mean success for me, and that's awesome if it doesn't. But each one of us defines success differently. And the problem is that we get into this place where we let other people define success for us, whether it's the fourth grade teacher who in my case said, you're a really argumentative young woman, you should be a lawyer. Okay, I guess I'll be a lawyer. Like, what was that based on? That was based on, maybe she watched LA Law the night before or something. I reminded her of Susan Day. I mean, who knows? Like, she didn't have a crystal ball. I just didn't want to go out to PE at that moment. And so she said, I should be a lawyer. And then I spent the next 10 years creating an educational path that got me to law school. Well, that didn't necessarily make any sense to me. Or, after I dropped out of law school and was working in the White House, I was dating the man of my grandmother's dreams. And that guy came in the form of a 6'2" nice Jewish boy named Alan. And every time I kissed Alan, who was, by the way, a medical student from a good family, like he was like the trifecta, I would just think like eggs, milk, butter, cheese. I got to pick up the dry cleaning. I get at the dog groom. Like there was no spark. And my grandmother would say, like, you just have to concentrate. But like concentrate as I might, I didn't fit into her definition of success either, right? Like she thought I should be like the wife of a nice Jewish doctor. And then fast forward to the search firm, and I'm there working at the search firm where they're doing work in a way that doesn't make any sense for me. And I think it should be client mission first, along with making sure we have enough profits. And they're like profit first, client mission second. That didn't work for me either. So I was looking at my clients across the table thinking, well, we're trying to change the world. That's my definition of success. But next to me on my side of the table was my boss who was thinking, okay, get this work done fast and efficient and profitable because he's thinking about his bottom line. And so along the way, we have all these people who plant seeds for us about what success should be and who we should be. And it's not until we stop and we say, well, they're wrong. Maybe, I don't know. What does success mean for me? Is it the most amount of money? Like, for example, if you're the kind of person who says, I love to go on vacations, just like short weekends to cosmopolitan cities where I wake up in my 4-star hotel bed and I have room service breakfast, that's going to cost you a lot of money, right? But if you're somebody who says, I want to wake up in a tent by a beautiful stream and make those eggs over a fire, campfire that I build, that's not going to cost you a lot of money at all, but it's going to cost you a lot of time to do that. So making a lot of money may be the definition of success that the external world has given us, but it might not be consonant for who you are as a person. And you have to stop and say, I'm not going to lean into that external definition of success. I want to stop and figure out, what does success mean for me And once I do that, how do I create a life where my career allows me to build that life instead? Because that's when success actually equals happiness.
But how do you drill down into what success means for you? Like, I do believe there are those external influences, and I do believe people plant seeds, and that's a reflection of what they're thinking in their own mind. Like maybe your teacher did watch Law and Order or whatever TV show, but how do you drill down? How do you get to your core? Like, is it meditation? Is it reading? Is it journaling? Is it talking to people? Like what is the actual, how do you get to the meat and potatoes of it? How do you really drill down into who you are at your core?
So Albert Einstein said that all wisdom is experience, or sorry, all knowledge is experience. And I actually believe that to be true. I think you don't really know something until you've been through it. You can read it, you can meditate on it, you can learn it, but I don't think you can actually know something until you've been through it. But with all due respect to our good friend Al, I will also say that if all knowledge is experience, I think all wisdom is framework. And so I think the beginning of really drilling down to understand who you are and what you care about is to have a framework, is to have language around that. And so it's why I wrote the book. So the framework of Limitless is that people who have success and happiness together have found consonance. They have found work that is meaningful for them. And consonance, I found when I, over the course of interviewing thousands of people in my career in executive search, really came from 4 elements: calling, connection, contribution, and control. And each one of us want each of these things differently at different ages and different life stages. And so for me, how do you drill down to figuring out what you really care about is to spend some time thinking about these 4 elements and what really matters to you at this moment. So calling. Some gravitational force, something that's bigger than you, something that you care about that gets you out of bed in the morning. It could be a leader who inspires you. It can be a business that you want to build. It can be a bottom line you want to grow. It can be a family that you want to develop. It can be anything that you care about. The second is connection. Does your work matter? Would it matter if you called in sick to work tomorrow? Do you see sight lines between the work that you're doing on a daily basis and the calling that you want to serve? Third, contribution. If connection is all about you, the work contribution is really all about you. So what is this brand, this paycheck, this job, this company, what does it do for you in terms of the values that you want to manifest into your life on a daily basis, in the money or the flexibility that you have to have the lifestyle that you like, or the velocity that it's giving to your career trajectory? And then lastly, control. How much personal agency do you have over the amount of connection that your work has to that calling or the contribution that it's making into your life? And as I said, at every age and at every life stage, it's going to be different. So when I was 21 years old, dropping out of law school, joining that campaign, I wanted calling. That was all I cared about. That was interesting to me. I had no connection whatsoever. I mean, I was fetching coffee for the person who was fetching coffee, right? Like I was useless. In terms of contribution, it wasn't paying me diddly squat. I was worth my weight in ramen soup, but I knew that I was manifesting my values on a daily basis. And I knew that had this guy won, I could be in a pretty interesting place. In terms of control, I had no control. Again, like I didn't know if they were going to send me to, Metairie, Louisiana or Jacksonville, Florida. Like it didn't matter. But I didn't need that because at that age, I wasn't supporting a family, and I was young enough, didn't have to worry about putting money into my IRA. I mean, these things didn't make a difference to me. And I think that if people sit for a while with this framework and think, okay, well, that might work for her when she's 21. Now that she's 48, how's that going to work? Well, I have this calling. I want to get this book that's out. But everything I have to do has to be connected. I'm not going to get on a plane to go to some very small media city to talk to 4 people, because that's taking time away from all the rest of the things that I could be doing that will connect me more to getting that book out. In terms of contribution, I've got teenage kids right now, and I want to make sure that the work that I've done, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I want to have that control because I want to make sure it allows me to be home for those really important moments, like the first day of school or the science fair or back to school night or prom or any of that stuff. And so as I'm going through this, you're probably thinking in your mind, well, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. And that's why, like, I have this calling about building this podcast or building this business, but I also want to do it myself because I like to have lots of control. Right? You're probably thinking like, it's not giving me a ton of money right now, but it's allowing me to meet lots of people, which will then allow me to do some of these other things that will be connected more to what I want to do in the future. So it's this framework that really helps you say, oh, okay, I want the work to contribute. Maybe it's money, maybe it's network, maybe it's knowledge. It's different for all of us.
Why was it so important to share the story of others throughout your life?
You mean in the book? Why do I do that?
No. Throughout your life, you've said that you were helping other people share their stories, and you've interviewed people, and you've written the book. And why was that so important to you?
I just think people are fascinating. I mean, don't you find that on this podcast? Don't you find I always considered it. So you have to remember, I was doing this work for nonprofit organizations, and they were, massive nonprofits with hundreds of $millions of budgets. I mean, they were big businesses. But I would interview people and I would get to hear their stories. I didn't necessarily hear what they accomplished because, I was the CEO. By the time they got to me, they were qualified. I got to hear why they wanted to do the thing they wanted to do, like what really mattered to them. And I remember shortly after September, shortly before September 11th, actually, I was interviewing a woman who was the head of communications for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And Egypt Air 800 had just crashed about 6 months earlier. And she was in charge of crisis communications. And I asked her, I was like, so how do you get so good at crisis communication? Like, that's not something they can just teach you in a book. How do you do that? And we were sitting at the Harbor Club of New York. I remember she put her little sandwich down and she looked at me across the table and she said, when I was growing up, my dad was a drunk. And I never knew on Friday night, payday, if he was going to come home with a bag of groceries, an envelope of cash, or a broken gin bottle that he'd whip at my head and my brother's head. You get pretty good at handling crises. Right? I mean, that's a gift. I interviewed a guy who wanted to run a national gang intervention program. And I asked him why he cared about this. Guy had, gone to a private high school. He had gone to Harvard. He'd gotten a law degree from Yale. He was spiffy, right? He was really like put together. And he said, I grew up in Oakland, and I got shot when I was 15 years old. And I remember my younger cousin holding my head in his hands at 8 years old. I'm bleeding out on the street. And I remember praying to God that if I survived that moment, I would work the rest of my life to make sure that nobody's younger cousin ever had to go through this experience with them ever again. Like, I would never know that if I just looked at his resume and I just talked about the things that he experienced. And so this is Simon Sinek's thing, right? Start with why. Like the why, the reason that people do what they do is endlessly fascinating to me, because we all present ourselves as this perfectly, put together outside person, this definition of success that everybody else will accept. And it turns out that inside we are so incredibly different and interesting and unique. And that's where the special is. Like, we are our stories, and learning people's stories is a beautiful thing.
It truly is a gift. It truly is a gift. I agree with you 100%.
I feel so lucky.
Me too. I know exactly what you mean. Like, every single person, including yourself, of course, every single person that I get to talk to, I'm just so infinitely grateful for that opportunity to hear another story and learn another lesson and to just be showered with wisdom and learn the experiences of truly incredible people. And I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. And I'm mostly interested in those Rubicon moments, the moments where you are a different person after than before, right? There are moments in my life where I can say, there was the before and there was the after, and there is a direct line in between, and nothing was ever the same again. Like, it's just, there are these moments in life, and sometimes they come through promotions, sometimes they come through, through windfalls, sometimes they come through diagnoses or world catastrophes. I mean, they could be good, they could be bad, but there is the before and there is the after. And those and we have lots of them in our lives. And those moments for me are, I could dig around in those all day long. I am constitutionally incapable of making small talk. and I have had experiences where I've like met people, and within 30 seconds of knowing them, we're like going deep, and people are just sort of like watching the conversation as if it's like a sporting event. Because I want to care about what your summer vacations are. I really do, but I just don't. I want to know what makes you tick.
How do you get that depth or achieve that depth with somebody so quickly?
I ask. It's really not that hard. It's really not. I think we are so busy. I want you to notice, like in the rest of the conversations you have today and tomorrow and the next day, you will say something to somebody about an experience that you had, and their immediate answer will be, well, I had that, blah, 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 blah. And they'll talk about themselves. And then they don't ask a follow-up question. You don't ask a follow-up question, and your conversation stays here. But if you ask a follow-up question, well, why did that happen? Or, God, that really must have sucked. Tell me how that felt. Or, God, well, what did you do next? I mean, if you just ask a question, like, it's not that hard to get people to talk. All you have to do is listen, right? Like 2 ears, 1 mouth, like that's the ratio. And I actually posted on Facebook the other day. I was like so triggered by somebody, and I was like, if somebody tells you something that's going on in their life, and your immediate reaction is, well, in my experience, or I think, or this happened to me, like, you are a narcissistic bore. Like, it's like, don't do that. Like, we can all do better. Like, it's not that hard to ask a question and to go a little bit deeper. And with those questions, we learn stories, and with those stories, we discover empathy, and with empathy, we create relationships. And every entrepreneur listening to this might be going, oh, here was all soft stuff, but every business deal happens through relationships. That's how it happens. You get invited into the room, behind the room, where things actually happen because of the relationships. And that starts with listening.
I agree 100%.
That's why you're doing this podcast, because you like to listen. You like the stories.
I do. I really do. Let's talk about these pivotal moments of yours. You may have touched on some of them, but I really want to drill down into the most impactful moments that have changed your life.
Yeah. Where do you want to start? I got a lot of them.
Let's start at the very top of the most impactful. See what happens from there.
Well, in 1992, I walked into a small campaign office in Gainesville, Florida, and saw in the corner of the room a little tiny black and white TV with then Governor Bill Clinton giving this impassioned talk about how there was nothing that's wrong with America that can't be fixed with what's right with America. And he offered as a solution a policy of community service in exchange for college tuition. And I went in that moment from being a law student who wanted to run to become the first female United States senator from the great state of Florida, and saying, I'm going to be the solution, I'm going to help, to going, that needs to happen, and we need to get him elected, and dropping out of law school and doing everything I possibly could to get him elected, and then ending up in the White House office that actually created the AmeriCorps program, in which a million individuals have served. So there was the like before moment, and then the after moment of that one. That was pretty impactful.
Yeah, I'd say that's a game changer right there.
and that game changer moment happened because they were just playing a VHS tape in this tiny little strip mall in Gainesville. Like, it doesn't have to be, oh my God, I met Oprah. Although, Oprah, if you're listening, call me. But it doesn't have to be that. It has to be, it could be anything. It's just because my ears were open in that moment, and I happened to hear that.
All right, that's the top. Now we got to keep on going.
There are lots of moments, I mean, I met my husband in a bar in Washington, D.C. It's, like these are just moments. I believe that there's an adventure around every corner if you just look hard enough. I really do firmly believe that. And I think that it's in these adventures that we discover what we actually care about, because these adventures, they're like classic side quests in video games, right? Like if the main quest is you got to get to the castle and slay the dragon and save the princess, in order to get there, you have to also like root around on your farm and till your wheat and bring it to the market and sell it. And in exchange for the wheat, you get the money, and for the money, you get the horse and the sword and the potion, so you can get to the castle and slay the dragon and save the princess. But all the mucking around, all those adventures are where you're like, oh, got it. I'm actually supposed to be going this way and not that way. So, there are. I took a course at University of Texas from Sarah Weddington, who was the lawyer who argued Roe v. Wade in front of the Supreme Court. Now, she did it when she was 27 years old, right? Like, imagine that. You're about that age, right? Like, you're younger than that, I think. Like, imagine going to the Supreme Court right now and arguing Roe v. Wade. And she said, I didn't get the case because I was working at a fancy law firm. Like, nobody wanted to hire lady lawyers back in 1970, whatever, in Texas. She said, I got it because into the public service law clinic walked Jane Roe, and the case got handed to me not as the best lawyer or the most well-resourced or the smartest or the most experienced, but as the most proximate person to the front door. Like, that's how I got the case. But I knew that in order to win, I had to learn every single rule and every single law and every single procedure, so I could dance circles around all those good old boys and all their courts of law all the way up to the Supreme Court. So that was a pivotal moment also, right? Like, learn the rules. And if you learn the rules, you can learn how to maneuver your way through. So when I was sitting at that fancy search firm and realizing this isn't the way I want to do this isn't what success means to me, I went back to that lesson that I'd forgotten of 20 years earlier. I'd totally forgotten about. And I said, I wonder why we charge 1/3 first year's cash compensation to do search. I wonder where that number comes from. And it turns out it was completely arbitrary. So then I said, okay, well, if it's completely arbitrary, if I were to set up this game in a way that evened the playing field between the big organizations and the small organizations, incentivize my team to actually pay attention to both of them and actually put our profit margin in line with the mission of the organization, so that we could make just as much, if not more money, while charging them less and actually doing better work and incentivizing people, how would I set up the rules? And once I saw that, I saw the solution, which meant I'm clearly part of the problem. So I have to leave and do my own thing. So I think there are moments that are like, in that moment in that small campaign office in Gainesville, there was the before the VHS moment and the after the VHS moment. It was clear as day, like a lightning bolt from the sky. Then there's other moments where you're like, oh, that seed had been planted for me so long ago, and now I understand why it's there. So I think some of these moments are lightning bolt moments, and some of them are like, slow growth seed moments.
Let's talk about legacy.
Okay.
What do you want to be remembered for in 100,000 years from now?
I want people to say that their life was better, that they were able to do more of what they wanted for the people that they loved and the causes they hold dear, because I was part of it. I don't really want my name on a building. I don't really need my name on a park bench. I want my husband to scatter my ashes and put me somewhere warm. I told him if he puts me somewhere cold, I'll haunt him forever. I'm like, go somewhere where you can go this deep in the water, and if you can still see your toes, I'll take it. That's where I want to be. That's it. I want my legacy to be that I was part of the recoiling of the trebuchet. I was the foundation. I was the fulcrum for other people to do great things. I have a huge ego, as I mentioned, and that I want to be part of that momentum, but I don't need my name on the finished product.
When was the pivotal moment that legacy clicked for you?
So about 6 years ago, I would say. I do a lot of political fundraising, and we had one of our local U.S. Congress people at our home, and a photographer was there. And after the event, she sent me a series of photographs, and there's one photograph in particular where I am sort of like stage left, and I'm just I'm clearly like I've got like I'm so proud. Like I'm just so proud of how well this candidate is doing, and she's blurry, and I'm just clear as can be. And I think seeing that photo of myself where it's so obvious that I was getting so much joy in watching her shine, I realized that if there was ever a photograph to describe who I am, it's that photograph. That's just, I now make my living center stage, but I don't need to be the person who gets all the credit. I get so much joy from nachas, right? I get so much joy from being part of somebody else discovering their own multitudes. That's what I want my legacy to be. I don't want people to cry at my funeral. I want it to be like a fun time where people tell stories about that place where I helped them to realize that they were limitless.
You know, that moment of joy, of just pure, just 100% in the moment, fully present, pure joy. When you said that, it made me think of my little cousin. Her name's Mickey, and when she was younger, my aunt and uncle took her to, I think it was somewhere where there were dolphins. And she was either playing with the dolphin or maybe riding the dolphin. She's this little kid, and they have a picture of her, like the dolphin's going full speed. She's hanging on, and the biggest smiles is just on her face. She's just so happy. It's like, yeah, this is it. This is what life's about. This is pure, sheer joy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what pictured in my mind. And
but it's like she had that look on her face, and like imagine the look on their face watching her, right? Like there's something beautiful about watching somebody that you love burst through to the next emotional plateau, the next I as you mentioned in the introduction, I've run 3 marathons, and I am not a runner, right? Like I before I ran that first marathon, I had run my first ever mile a year and a half earlier, like the first ever mile of my life. Like I was not athletic. I went to computer sleepaway camp. Like I was not an athletic person. But when you train for a marathon, you have you ever run a marathon?
I have not.
Okay.
I used to run cross country, but never a marathon.
Okay, so running cross country, if you're supposed to run, a 3-mile race, you don't run 3 miles in practice all the time. You run like 2 miles. You run them faster. And so when you train for a marathon, you run 20 miles. The marathon's 26.2, but 20 miles is like the longest training run that you'll do. So during the Boston Marathon, it's the year I was running, it was 92 degrees. And that's pretty hot because your body temperature thinks it's 20 degrees warmer than it is, right? So it's, it's pretty hot. I've got like ice packs like in my jog bra, like I don't even know what my name is anymore. And I get to the 20-mile mark, and I remember thinking, wonder what happens now. I've never gone this far before. I probably have at least an hour left because it's 92 degrees. So I'm not exactly running my fastest. I wonder what happens now. And that's the moment where there are 2 voices inside your head. And there's one that says, you're going to do this no matter what happens. Like run, walk, crawl. You're going to be a marathoner for the rest of your damn life. Like you're going to do this. They're going to put a heat sheet on you and a medal around your neck. Like you're a superhero. You're going to do this. And then there's this other voice that goes, what are you, crazy? You're going to die out here. You've never run this far in your entire life. And by the way, you have vasovagal syncope, which means you pass out when you get dehydrated. You are going to die. And your feet are going like, like they're like literally like, they're melting into the hot black tar pavement. And you're like, ah. And only one of those voices gets to win, right? You have these two voices in your head. And there are moments in all of our lives when we're like, I've never done this before. I'm not sure what happens. Am I going to fail? Should I stop? Should I back out? Should I disappear? And you get to decide. Like, you are the only one who gets a vote in that moment. And the problem with our careers, the problem with our lives, the problem with the decisions that we make about what happiness is supposed to look like is that we're giving votes to all these people in our lives who shouldn't even have voices. And that includes the one inside of our own head as well. So I love those moments of breakthrough, of like, you've never done this before. And look, you just did. And by the way, your pants didn't light on fire. Like, you survived it. And not only did you survive it, you learned something about yourself in this process. I didn't want to go do that TEDx talk. Like, I got that phone call to do that talk, and I had no interest whatsoever. I like being the person, behind stage left. I like being that person. And I took the call on speakerphone in my car. This is another pivotal moment. I was on speakerphone in my car, and my older son is about to be 17, but he was 14 at the time. And it was my friend Tamsin Webster who said, I saw this blog post you wrote and it seemed really interesting. And would you ever consider doing a TEDx talk? And I said, no effing way. I'm not interested. Thanks for asking. Goodbye. And my older son looks at me and he's like, so Mom, don't you always tell me that I should do hard things? And don't you always tell me that if it doesn't challenge me, it doesn't change me? And don't you always tell me that life starts on the other side of the fear? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, so what gives, Mom? I got to do this, don't I? Yep. 6 weeks later, there I am on the stage. No notes, no net. There it is. I didn't want to do it, but it turns out I did it and I didn't die. And then I started getting offers to speak. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is a job? This is an actual job? People are going to pay me to travel around the world and speak? That's amazing. But those are the breakthrough moments. And you can't have those breakthrough moments unless you do something you've never done before, unless you do something that scares you, unless you like jump out of the airplane thinking, I'm mostly certain there's a backpack in here, but not entirely, but I'm going to figure it out on the way down.
You mentioned connection as one of the 4 C's.
Yes.
And I love talking about connection. I love that word. I love everything about it. I think it is literally a foundation of humanity, and I don't say that lightly. And I'm interested in learning. You talked about it a little bit, but I really want to drill down here. What is your philosophy on developing deep, meaningful, and genuine connection with another human being?
Well, I think that the way to develop meaningful and genuine connection to another human being is to listen, is to see them, is to have those conversations that we were talking about earlier, and is to, I talk about connection in the book in terms of whether or not your work is connected to the calling, to the thing that you care about, and understanding whether or not it matters. It may be that some of us say, I don't really care if I'm just pushing papers all day long. It's paying me the kind of money I want to contribute to the life I want to live, or it's allowing me to have the flexibility to take care of, aging parents or young children, or I'm doing it for a cause that matters to me. So maybe connection doesn't matter as much. But I think the way that for those of us who do want lots of connection, I want lots of connection in my work, is to understand where it fits into our life, where it fits into the calling that we want to pursue, or the way that we want it to build our career. I think calling interpersonally is the same exact thing. We have to understand, you can't have genuine connection to somebody with whom you have nothing in common, or no similar interests, or don't have a love or a genuine support for where they want to go. You don't have to, my father and I have very different political leanings. We have connection. Our connection is in our differences, but we still have that kind of connection. And I think it comes from understanding the other person's hopes and dreams, yours, where those two align, and really understanding where you can both together, become better.
What's your greatest theory?
My greatest theory. My greatest theory is that I have very dense bones because I should have been much taller. That's my crackpot medical theory. I think everyone should be allowed one crackpot medical theory. And my father is 6 foot, my mother is 5'9", my sister is 5'9.5", and I'm 5'5". So my greatest theory is that I have dense bones. My greatest actual real theory is that our brains lie to us all the time. Our brains have been formed through millions of years of evolution to tell us to run away from things that are scary. And so we have rate limiters in our brains that say, that hurts, stop doing it. And I think pain tolerance and suffering tolerance are very different. So I do not like pain. Pain is uncomfortable. But am I willing to suffer long for something that I care about? Am I willing to do the hard yards in the dark when nobody sees because I want to break through a profit line, a revenue line on my company, or I want to break through a speed PR on my rowing team, or I want to get deeper into a relationship with somebody that might be sort of difficult and hard to reach, or I've got 2 teenage boys. So, how long is my tolerance for like trying to get them to talk to me? I think that our brains lie to us about pain, and they teach us that we're not able to handle suffering, when in fact it's going through some of the suffering that gets us to the place past the 20-mile mark in the marathon that gets us to the finish line.
What gets you emotional?
Those videos of soldiers coming back from war and surprising their kids at school. I cry every damn time at those. Those get me emotional. And I think it's because of connection, right? It's because of human connection. I do believe what gets me righteously indignant is probably also what gets me emotional. I think that the way that we treat public service in our country today is unfortunate. I have long been on a tear that I think that that public service before political service should be required, because I think that past is prologue, right? My background as a recruiter, and I believe that some evidence of service, whether it's Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, military service, some kind of public service, should be prerequisite to running for office. I just think that showing that you've been able to put country before self is, for me, a prerequisite to know that you'll be able to put country before party. I just firmly believe that. And so I get very emotional and very adamant and very indignant about the importance that we should be placing on service in our country. And so how we treat people who have served, whether it's veterans or other people returning from service, is a matter of deep emotion to me. And I dedicate a lot of my time towards helping veterans transition back into civilian life better, or dealing with issues with PTSD and those sorts of things. That stuff is very important to me.
What does spirituality mean to you?
So I am not that religious of a person. I did not grow up with a lot of religion. I married somebody from a different religion than me, who grew up with religion, but also doesn't have a lot of it. For me, it's really, it's spirituality for me is really humanity, right? It's how do we treat other people? And I believe deeply that we are going to be judged by how we treat those around us who have the least and can do the least for us. And at the end of the day, I would like to think that if there is some sort of creator that judges us, that's what we will be judged for, and not how fancy our cars are, or how much money we donated in the buildings we have our names on, or how big of businesses we built, but really how we treated other human beings on a daily basis. And I that to me is, if I feel any spirituality whatsoever, it's sort of in that place, sort of how we treat our fellow person face to face.
So I want to thank you so much, Laura, for coming on the show today. I really do appreciate your time, and I just have a few more questions for you. Then we'll wrap it on up. Um, you're obviously very professional and extremely good at what you do. And I have a ton of respect for you, and I really do admire you quite a lot. But I want to know, what do you do to like let loose, relax, take off your professional hat, and just be a person, like be a relaxed person?
So I'm going to say this, and this is not scripted in any way. I'm this. This is who I am. This is how I talk to my friends. Uh, I've been called my own weather system. I've been on my own time zone. I have a friend, Scott Stratton, who's a speaker, who says he's like this all the time also. And he goes, it's exhausting to be friends with me. And I'm like, I feel like it's probably exhausting to be friends with me because this is who I am. Like, like I said, I don't make small talk. Like I talk about big stuff all the time. And I do that when I'm, relaxing at home, snuggling my dog or hanging out with my teenage kids or this is, I have another friend who's like, oh, are you going to be able to take some time and just have a little chill out and relax in you time? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like, I love what I do. I love to work. I wrote a book about consonants, right? Like that means like who you are matches what you do. This is me. This is what I do. I love it.
Who do you get vulnerable with?
My husband, my children. In our house, we do a family meeting every weekend, and it's sort of our moment. It's like the touch point to just figure out who's coming and going. I'm on the road 150,000 miles a year. My husband doesn't travel, but he has a super inflexible job, and I have two teenage kids that have lots of stuff going on, and we also happen to have a young woman who's living in our basement who is trying to get an Olympic rowing team. So she's, busy training and has her own goals. But we have a family meeting every weekend and it's 45 minutes. It's every weekend. And we start by talking about just some value that we have as a family, just something that we care about as a family unit. And then we do like an airing of gratitudes and we go around and everyone kind of gives a shout out to whoever about like, hey, thanks for emptying the dishwasher without my asking, or, hey, I saw you broke a new PR on what you're doing, or good job on that test, or, you made a bestseller, or like, whatever the things are, just yay. It's like a moment to give someone a shout out. Then we do a moment where we go through the calendar, what's coming, like busy week coming up. I'm traveling to these 3 cities. I'm going to need a little help there or the other. Who's going to handle dinner on what night? Who's picking up who? Then we talk about long range planning, and then things get real. Then we do the airing of grievances. And that's where we do the like, hey, mom, you yelled at me the other day, and I think you were kind of stressed about something going on at work. And I thought that was kind of unfair to me. And we have a real conversation about like what's happening in our house. And then we schedule the next meeting, and that's like the whole thing. And it's 45 minutes. We're in, we're out, we're done. But it really is an opportunity for each of us to talk about something that we're working on, something that's hard, something new that we're going to try, something that might be difficult in the coming week, something that we've been dealing with for the past week. And what's good about it, especially for someone like me who is very bad at asking for help, is that we really talk about just what's happening inside and how we as a community can uphold and uplift each other, which allows us to be able to have these moments of anxiety and stress and fear and vulnerability in a super protected and safe space. So I think that's where I get vulnerable. It's in family meeting.
I think the family meeting idea is amazing. And I think that's awesome.
Well, I wrote a whole blog post about it. You can have that in your show notes.
Yeah, definitely.
We stole it from my kids' camp. It was their tent meeting idea. So we didn't make it up, but we've made it our own. And we've been doing it for 2 years. And I would say that it has radically changed the tenor and the tone of our household.
What is one thing about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that we did not talk about today? In other words, what did I miss?
It's a good question. I've done, I would say, about 90 podcasts at this point in the launch running up to and through the book. And I've been asked a lot of questions. I think you've asked more about sort of who I am and like where I came from and the kinds of things that made me who I am than a lot of other people have. And I think that's pretty good. You didn't ask me about failures and where things went wrong, and what I would do differently. Probably because you get a lot of canned answers about that, I would imagine. I'd probably imagine that you probably have already asked that. I don't know. I have to think about that. Maybe something, I'm a lot of fun. I'm pretty intense. I'm a kick in the ass. I am wrapped up in a warm hug. And I do push people a little harder than they might want to go. I will tell you, I'm a terrible manager. We didn't talk about that. I'm a great leader. I'm a great friend in the foxhole. I am the person you want in your corner in a bar fight, but boy, you don't want me managing you on a daily basis. That's pretty tough. So we didn't talk about how bad I am at managing people.
Would you like to talk about it now?
Would you like a story that would set your hair on fire?
Absolutely.
Okay. So here's this is the Rubicon moment when I realized that I was a very bad manager. I was managing a woman, and she was millennial. I love millennials. I talk about how much I love millennials in my book. So millennials, don't send me hate email. I know you don't even email. Don't send me hate texts, or hate snaps. But this one particular millennial was incredibly terrible, and she was living in another city. I went to go visit her in that city because she wanted to have coffee and have a conversation about how I managed people of her generation. Okay, using this tone of voice with me. And she sits me down and she says, Laura, I want to tell you about this thing that I learned in my MBA program called the compliment sandwich. Have you heard of it? Okay, now this is like 10, 15 years ago. So, I'd been on the planet Earth for a good 35 years and I'd had a lot of sandwiches, and I never order like a wheat bread sandwich. You order like a roast beef sandwich, right? Like, this isn't a compliment sandwich. It's a like crap sandwich. Like, let's talk about what's really happening here. So I'm like, no, please tell me, what's a compliment sandwich? And she says, well, first you start by saying something really good about my work. So I walk in open with my guard down, wanting to hear what you have to say. And she's literally using this tone of voice with me. And you've now known me for an hour. So this is not exactly a tone of voice that's going to work well with me. And then you have to tell me something really, you have to give me this criticism, but it needs to be constructive. She literally wags her finger at me. Then the second part of the sandwich is that you have to tell me something really good about my work again, so that I leave feeling great about myself and wanting to put your constructive criticism into effect. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't the fact that I sign your paychecks enough to incentivize you to put my criticism into? But what comes out of my mouth before I can stop myself, and I'm not proud of this moment, and this is the moment where I realized that I needed protection, my staff needed protection from me, is I say, you see, the problem with the compliment sandwich is that I can't think of a second nice thing to say about your work. Yikes. Yes. So that was a Rubicon moment on the way home, from which I called my mentor and I was like, so it turns out that I'm really good at this stuff and I'm really bad at this stuff. And I think maybe I need to hire a vice president, a chief operating officer to manage my people, because I can inspire them to want to do well, but I don't know how to get them to actually do it. So that's when I hired my business partner, who came on, who is a classically trained cellist with a beautiful blonde bob, PhD in psychology from Georgetown. She grew up in Atlanta. She did like horse jumping, dressage. Like, she was all here and I was all here. And we were a great partnership because she did care what everybody was doing for their summer vacation, even though I did not. So yeah, that is, I think the lesson there, of course, is you figure out what you can do well and do the hell out of that. And figure out what you don't do well and either learn how to do it, or if it's not something that's going to be in your wheelhouse or where you get energy, or if it's distracting you from the time that you're spending doing this stuff, find somebody to do that stuff and partner with them and be better. That's it. Now you got all my stories.
What question should I be asking you? Specifically me, asking specifically you. What question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
Probably specifically you asking specifically me how all of this is different for women.
I would love to hear your answer about that.
And I don't know if you do that, but I don't, we all have different sets of privileges. You have some, I have some, but the space in between yours and mine is something that I could probably teach to people that you might not necessarily ask. And I think that, I mean, we could do a whole other show on just how this is all different from women, for women. But I would say it's really in getting comfortable with the idea of ambition being more responsibility than ambition, because that really is a place where women, I think, get caught up. We not only have to have the right job and the right spouse and the right house, but we also are responsible for the right kids and the right after school programs and all the rest of the stuff that goes on in there. And understanding that part of your calling may be raising a family. It may not be raising a family. It may be co-parenting that family. It may be having a spouse that stay at home when you're the one who's working. All of those definitions are going to be okay, but it's really not letting other people and other generations put ideas on you. And I think that women have so many opportunities, even more so than men, for on and off ramps, depending on, when they get married, when they have children, first child, second child, however many children they're going to have, that gives them even more opportunities to reinvent and to find those multitudes within them. And I think women, because we also have huge shifts in hormones at different times, also will, unlike men who I think have sort of more of this as they're looking for ages and stages, I think women will have much broader differences of what they're looking for at different times. And so it's just being much more comfortable that at every age and at every life change, every life stage, our calling, connection, contribution, and control, our own personal definition of consonants will be different. For women, there'll be even more of them, and the definitions may be even more varied. And the people around you will be translating your interpretation of that through their own lens of fear and anxiety or hope or nervousness or whatever definition is being put on them. So for women, I think there's more opportunities to do it, but you have to build even a thicker skin to ignore everybody else and carve your own path.
Well, that's very powerful. And I'm very glad that you said something about that. So thank you for helping me ask the question. I really do appreciate that. And Laura, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing this time with me. It's been very special and very meaningful. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been really great. I appreciate an interviewer who is actually engaged in the conversation. As I mentioned, I've done like 90 of podcasts or something at this point, and this puts you really in the top few percent of people who are actually having real conversations. So I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I also want to take a second to acknowledge you for all the good work that you do and the people that you help and, all the impact that you are creating in the lives of other people. I don't think enough people like yourself get the credit that you deserve. So thank you very much for that. And I wish you the best of luck in all your endeavors moving forward.
Thank you so much. And I should say that if people are listening to this and they're like, oh, this sounds interesting, I want to figure out my own framework, I created a quiz at limitlessassessment.com where there's about 60 questions. It takes about 15 minutes. There's some pretty, as people who are still listening will know, they are intense questions because I'm an intense person. But at the end of it, you will get a radar chart that has two different charts. The first shows how much calling, connection, contribution, and control you want to have in your life. And then the second overlaps, we hope, and shows how much of each of the four you want to have in your life. And where they're not in consonance, it'll give you some tips about how to get there. So that's at limitlessassessment.com.
Awesome. And I highly encourage everybody to go there and engage and definitely take advantage of that tremendous opportunity. And I want to thank everybody who is listening, watching so much. I love y'all very, very much. You're the reason that I do this. And I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Truly, truly thank you. And I will see you on the next episode.